A winter's night. The wind howled fiercely, rattling the windows of the small cottage nestled at the edge of the forest. Outside, the snow fell in thick, swirling sheets, transforming the landscape into a world of white. Inside, the flickering flames of the fireplace provided the only warmth, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The scent of pine from the logs filled the room, and the soft crackling of the fire was the only sound that broke the silence. Sarah sat by the hearth, a woolen blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Her thoughts drifted as she stared into the flames, watching the embers glow with a quiet intensity. The house had been silent all day, save for the occasional creaking of the wood as the cold seeped through the walls. It had been days since she'd last seen another soul. The storm outside showed no sign of letting up. It had been like this for weeks, endless snowstorms that left the world buried under a thick, frozen blanket. The isolation was something Sarah had grown used to, but tonight, the loneliness felt heavier. The days of bustling life in the nearby village felt like a distant memory, a time when the world hadn't seemed so cold and distant. Her hand instinctively reached for the old photograph on the mantel. It was a picture of her and her brother, taken years ago, before the cold weather had ever begun to rule their lives. He had been her closest companion, the one person who understood her in ways no one else did. But that was before the accident, before the sudden tragedy that took him away. Now, it was just her and the relentless winter. She sighed, her breath visible in the chilled air. The wood in the stove crackled again, and the heat from the flames offered a brief respite from the bitter cold that had begun to seep into her bones. The storm had made the roads impassable, and the nearest neighbor was miles away. There was no one to check on her, no one to share the long nights. But Sarah was no stranger to the winter. She had grown up in these woods, learning from an early age how to survive the harshest seasons. She knew the signs of the coming cold, the patterns of the snow, the way the animals moved before a storm. It was a way of life she had come to accept, even as the days grew shorter and the nights longer. She stood up and moved to the window, wiping away the frost that had accumulated on the glass. The world outside was a blur of white. The trees were bent under the weight of the snow, their branches heavy and lifeless. It was a hauntingly beautiful sight, but it also reminded her of the emptiness she felt inside. For a moment, she considered venturing out into the storm, to see if there was anything beyond the snow-covered trees, anything to break the stillness. But she knew better. The cold was dangerous, and the forest, while familiar, could be unforgiving in such weather. Instead, she returned to the fire, settled back into her chair, and pulled the blanket tighter around her. She closed her eyes, listening to the storm rage outside, and allowed herself a small moment of peace. The world might be cold, but the warmth of the fire, the memories of better days, and the quiet strength she carried within would carry her through the night.